It is unnecessary for me to give the details of the first part of my long journey. My companion was guided by a perceptive faculty that, like the compass, enabled him to keep in the proper course. He did not question those whom we met, and made no endeavor to maintain a given direction, and yet he was traveling in a part of the country that was new to himself. I marveled at the accuracy of his intuitive perception, for he seemed never to be at fault. When the road forked, he turned to the right or the left in a perfectly careless manner, but the continuity of his course was never interrupted. I began mentally to question whether he could be guided us aright, forgetting that he was reading my thoughts, and he answered, "There is nothing strange in this self-directive faculty. Is not man capable of following where animals lead?" One of the objects of my special study had been to ascertain the nature of the instinct power of animals, the sagacity of brutes. The carrier pigeon will fly to its cote across hundreds of miles of strange country. The young pig will often return to its pen by a route unknown to it. The sluggish tortoise will find its home without a guide, without seeing a familiar object. Cats, horses, and other animals possess this power, which is not an unexplainable instinct but a natural sense better developed in some of the lower creatures than it is in man. The power lies dormant in man, but exists nevertheless. If we develop one faculty, we lose acuteness in some other power. Men have lost in mental development in this particular direction, while seeking to gain in others. If there were no record of the fact that light brings objects to the recognition of the mind through the agency of the eye, the sense of sight in an animal would be considered by men devoid of it as adaptability to extraordinary circumstances or instinct. So it is in that animals often see clearly, where to the sense of man there is only darkness. Such sight is not irresponsive action without consequence of a purpose. Man is not very magnanimous. Instead of giving credit to the lower animals for superior perception in many directions, he denies to them the conscious possession of powers imperfectly developed in mankind. We egotistically aim to raise ourselves, and do so in our own estimation by clothing the actions of the lower animals in a garment of irresponsibility. Because we cannot understand the inwardness of their power, we assert that they act by the influence of instinct. The term instinct, as I would define it, is an expression applied by men to a series of senses which man possesses but has not developed. The word is used by man to characterize the mental superiority of other animals in certain directions where his own senses are defective. Instead of crediting animals with these, to them, invaluable faculties, men conceitedly say they are involuntary actions. Ignorant of their mental status, man is too ignorant to admit that lower animals are superior to him in any way. But we are not consistent. Is it not true that in the direction in which you question my power, some men by cultivation often become expert beyond their fellows? And such men have also given very little systematic study to subjects connected with these undeniable mental qualities. The hunter will hold his course in utter darkness, passing inequalities in the ground and avoiding obstructions he cannot see. The fact of his superiority in this way over others is not questioned, although he cannot explain his methods nor understand how he operates. His quickened sense is often as much entitled to be called instinct as is the divining power of the carrier pigeon. If scholars would cease to devote their entire energies to the development of the material, artistic, or scientific part of modern civilization and turn their attention to other forms of mental culture, many beauties and powers of nature now unknown would be revealed. However, this cannot be, for under existing conditions the strife for food and warmth is the most important struggle that engages mankind and controls our actions. In a time that is surely to come, however, when the knowledge of all men is united into a comprehensive whole, the book of life, illuminating thereby, will contain many beautiful pages that may be easily read, but which are now not suspected to exist. The power of the magnet is not uniform. Engineers know that the needle of a compass inexplicably deviates from time to time as a line is run over the earth's surface, but they also know that aberrations of the needle finally correct themselves. The temporary variations of a few degrees that occur in the running of a compass line are usually overcome after a time, and without a change of course the disturbed needle swerves back and again points to the calculated direction as is shown by the vernier. Should I err in my course, it would be but a trifle only, and we could not go far astray before I would unconsciously discover the true path. I carry my magnet in my mind. Many such dissertations or explanations concerning related questions was subsequently made in what I then considered a very impressive though always unsatisfactory manner. I recall those episodes now, after one more remarkable experience which are yet to be related, and record them briefly with little wonderment, because I have gone through ventures which demonstrate there is nothing improbable in the statements, and I will not consume time with further details of this part of my journey. We leisurely traversed state after state, crossed rivers, mountains, and seemingly interminable forests. The ultimate object of our travels, a location in Kentucky, I afterward learned, led my companion to guide me by a roundabout course to Wheeling, Virginia. By the usual mountain roads of that day, instead of going, as he might perhaps have much more easily done, via Buffalo and the lake shore to northern Ohio, and then southerly across the country. He said in explanation that the time lost at the beginning of our journey by this route was more than recompensed by the ease of the subsequent Ohio River trip. Upon reaching Wheeling, he disposed of the team, and we embarked on a keel boat and journeyed down the Ohio to Cincinnati. The river was falling when we started and became very low before Cincinnati was reached, too low for steamers, and our trip in that flat-bottomed boat on the sluggish current of the tortuous stream proved tedious and slow. Arriving at Cincinnati, my guide decided to wait for a rise in the river, designing then to complete our journey on a steamboat. I spent several days in Cincinnati quite pleasantly, expecting to continue our course on the steamer to Tecumseh, then in port and ready for departure. At the last moment my guide changed his mind, and instead of embarking on that boat, we took passage on the steamer George Washington, leaving Shippingport Wednesday, December 13th, 1826. During that entire journey, from the commencement to our final destination, my guide paid all the bills, and did not want either for money or attention from the people with whom we came in contact. He seemed everywhere a stranger, and yet very possessed of a talisman that opened every door to which he applied, and which gave an unlimited accommodations wherever he asked them. When the boat landed at Smithfield, Kentucky, a village on the bank of Ohio, just above the Paducah, we disembarked, and my guide then, for the first time, seemed mentally disturbed. "Our journey together is nearly over," he said. "In a few days my responsibility for you will cease. Nerve yourself for the future, and bear its trials and its pleasures manfully. I may never see you again, but as you are even now conspicuous in our history, and will be closely connected with the development of the plan in which I am also interested, although I am destined to take a different part, I shall probably hear of you again." We stopped that night at a tavern in Smithland. Leaving the place after dinner the next day on foot, we struck through the country into the bottom lands of the Cumberland River, traveling leisurely, lingering for hours in the course of a circuitous tramp of only a few miles. Although it was the month of December, the climate was mild and balmy. In my former home a similar time of year would have been marked with snow, sleet, and ice, and I could not but draw a contrast between the two localities. How different also the scenery from that of my native state. Great timber trees, oak, poplar, hickory, were a majestic possession of large tracts of territory, in the solitude of which man, so far as evidence of his presence were concerned, had never been trodden. From time to time we passed little clearings that probably were to be enlarged to thrifty plantations in the future, and finally we crossed the Cumberland River. That night we rested with Mr. Joseph Watts, a wealthy and cultured landowner who resided on the river's bank. After leaving his home the next morning, we journeyed slowly, very slowly, my guide seemingly passing with reluctance into the country. He had become a very pleasant companion, and his conversation was very entertaining. We struck the sharp point of a ridge the morning we left Mr. Watts' hospitable house. It was 4 or 5 miles distant, but on the opposite side of the Cumberland from Smithland. Here a steep bluff broke through the bottom land to the river's edge, the base of the bisected point being washed by the Cumberland River, which had probably cut its way through the stony mineral of this ridge in ages long past. We climbed to its top and sat upon the pinnacle, and from that point of commanding observation I drank in the beauties of the scene around me. The river at our feet wound gracefully before us, and disappeared in both directions, its extremes dissolving in a bed of forest. A great black buff, far up the stream, rose like a mountain upon the left side of the river. Bottom lands were about us, and hills appeared across the river in the far distance, towards the Tennessee River. With regret, I finally drew my eyes from the vision, and we resumed the journey. We followed the left bank of the river to the base of the Black Buff, Biswell's Hill, a squatter called it, and then skirted the side of that hill, passing along precipitous stone bluffs and among stunted cedars. Above us towered cliffs over cliff, almost perpendicularly. Below us rolled the river. I was deeply impressed by the changing beauties of this strange Kentucky scenery, but marveled at the fact that while I became light-hearted and enthusiastic, my guide grew correspondingly despondent and gloomy. From time to time he lapsed into thoughtful silence, and once I caught his eye directed toward me in a manner that I inferred to imply either pity or envy. We passed Biswell's Bluff and left the Cumberland River at its upper extremity, where another small creek empties into the river. Thence, after ascending the creek some distance, we struck across the country, finding it undulating and fertile, here and there a small clearing. During this journey we either camped out at night or stopped with a resident when one was to be found in that sparsely settled country. Sometimes there were exasperating intervals between our meals, but we did not suffer, for we carried with us supplies of food such as cheese and crackers, purchased in Smithland for emergencies. We thus proceeded a considerable distance into Livingston County, Kentucky. I observed remarkable sinks in the earth, sometimes cone-shaped, again precipitous. These cavities were occasionally of considerable size and depth, and they were more numerous in the uplands than in the bottoms. They were somewhat like the familiar sinkholes of New York State, but monstrous in comparison. The first that attracted my attention was near the Cumberland River, just before we reached Biswell's Hill. It was about 40 feet deep and 30 in diameter, with precipitous stone sides, shrubbery growing therein in exceptional spots where loose earth had collected on shelves of stone that cropped out along its rugged sides. The bottom of the depression was flat and fertile, covered with a luxuriant mass of vegetation. On one side of the base of the gigantic bowl, a cavern struck down into the earth. I stood upon the edge of this funnel-like sink and marveled at its peculiar appearance. A spirit of curiosity, such as often influences men when an unusual natural scene presents itself, possessed me. I clambered down, swinging from brush to brush, and stepped from shelving rock to shelving rock until I reached the bottom of the hollow and placed my hand above the black hole in its center. I perceived that a current of cold air was rushing therefrom upward. I probed with a long stick, but the direction of the opening was tortuous, and would not admit of examination in that manner. I dropped a large pebble stone into the orifice. The pebble rolled and clanked down, and at last the sound died away in the distance. I wished that I could go into the cavity as that stone had done, and find the secrets of this cave, I reflected, the natural love of exploration possessing me, as it probably does most men. My companion above, seated on the brink of the stone wall, replied to my thoughts. Your wish shall be granted. You have requested that which has already been laid out for you. You will explore where very few men have passed before, and will have the privilege of following your destiny into a realm of natural wonders. A fertile field of investigation awaits you, such as will surpass your most vivid imaginings. Come and seat yourself beside me, for it is my duty now to tell you something about the land we are approaching, the cavern fields of Kentucky.